Hello and welcome to this special episode of BRM TV. Now we're travelling south to meet up with the Risborough and District Model Railway Club. We know we're in for a rare treat to see a layout that's over 35 years old and soon never to be seen in public again. It's an opportunity we just can't miss, so stay with us, sit back and enjoy.
It is particularly interesting, this layout, because the prototype was built in 1839 and it is actually the oldest branch line railway station in the entire world. The creator of the line, Jeff Williams, didn't live in this area, but he wanted a layout that was a typical branch line terminal layout, and so he hit upon Aylesbury, which was not far from where he lived in Hertfordshire. And at that time there was quite a lot of the infrastructure still surviving. It didn't close down completely until the 1960s. Jeff Williams, who created the layout, was an engineer himself, and he built the whole of the layout, including the stock, and it is done to a very high degree of realism. So I was absolutely delighted a few years ago when there was an advertisement in the EM Gauge Society magazine offering the layout for sale. I went to see it, was completely enthused about it. It's been beautifully preserved over the years. Our fellow member Tim Peacock then went to see the layout, and we acquired it for the club from the person who had built it, and we are working with members of the family to restore it and make it an exhibition presentable layout. My name is Andrew David and I belong to the Risborough and District Model Railway Club. I'm interested in the history of railways. I write about the history of railways and I write about model railways. This layout has never been shown to the public before. It's known about through magazine articles, but we think that probably this will be the only occasion that the public will be able to see it working in its full glory. We are here now by a layout which is Aylesbury LNWR layout, and we're in the club room of the Risborough and District Model Railway Club. The Risborough and District Model Railway Club covers the area of Aylesbury. We have members from Aylesbury, and this particular layout is a layout of a former station in Aylesbury. One interesting thing is that when we did rewire it, because it needed to be rewired, it was wired in the 1970s and technology has moved on now, and we took a decision to completely rewire it with DCC. And when we actually put the locos on to run them, they ran straight away. Perspective is very carefully worked out so that the buildings at the rear are smaller than the buildings at the front of the layout. And the layout is designed to be seen from a higher level than would normally be for a layout of this type, so that you get the run right from the front to the back of the layout, and although it's quite narrow, it looks much wider than it is. One of the main sources of freight was, of course, poultry, the famous Aylesbury ducks, so ducks and geese would have been brought in. And there was also the New Holland agricultural vehicle factory, which was quite important as well. It wasn't built to be presented at exhibitions, it was built to be run in the attic of the person who created it, but it lends itself very nicely to being shown at exhibitions. So we would like to make a presentation to engage the public, and we're hoping to have a sort of front of house people who will explain the historical background and the way that it's being operated. And we're in the process of putting together a kind of a working timetable which will cover a day's running of trains, and we've decided on a race day at Aylesbury, and we'll have an excursion train bringing in the punters for the races, and we'll have a display and explanation about how the timetabling works. Well, we are showing it at RailX this year, 2016, towards the end of May. It's the second bank holiday in May at Stoke Mandeville Stadium near Aylesbury. At the moment, the club has no plans to show the layout at all after that. We're certainly not going to take it on the exhibition circuit. It's large, heavy, not made to be carried around, quite vulnerable and possibly easily damaged if we did that. So it wasn't made for that purpose. So if anybody has an opportunity to come to RailX this year, they will get the benefit of seeing this layout for what is possibly going to be its only public outing.
Today, I'm going to be talking about dirt, the sort of dirt that makes our models run poorly. Now, people are always asking me at exhibitions, how do you get your locos to run so well? And usually what I'm doing is I'm just talking to them about the way I've built the model, but the main thing is I've cleaned the wheels and the track. Now, as you know, all our models rely on connection between the rails for electricity and the wheels taking the power into the motor. If you get a bit of grime or anything between those two, then the model's going to run really badly. And for a lot of beginners, it doesn't seem to make sense to clean the wheels and the track. They've simply never heard of it. It's not something you see written about very much. Now, one of the things that you can't demonstrate very easily at an exhibition is how we go about cleaning up the wheels and the track. But we can on the DVD, so that's what I'm going to do now. Let's take our loco, a standard Bachmann model, which I've weathered a little bit and done a little bit of detailing on. And this is one of the locos that runs on my layout. Every morning before an exhibition, the first thing that happens before you lot all get in the door and just after I've had a cup of tea is the locos all go upside down behind the layout for a good clean. Now, to hold the model nice and securely, but without taking any of the detail off, hopefully, I use a nice foam Pico loco servicing cradle. This one's been around a long while, it's been stuffed in boxes, but it still works perfectly well. And that just, loco sits upside down in that and it isn't going to roll around the table. It's quite important to secure these things because you're going to be poking and prodding at it, and you really don't want to be knocking any bits off if you can help it. To clean the wheels, I'm going to use a fiberglass pencil. Now this has a bunch of fiberglass fibres in the end, and turning the end of it just extends them out as they wear away. It's quite important to try and keep your fingers off the end of this because you can get little bits of fiberglass stuck in them. If you do, just take a little bit of sticky tape on your finger and it'll pat it on there and it'll pull the fibres out again. It's a little safety note to start with. All I do is rub the wheels with the fiberglass pencil. Now obviously going around like that is going to be quite time consuming. So what I do, I just take a really old controller. This is, I think this dates from the 1970s, but it's a perfectly good controller. couple of leads off the back and put a bit of power through the wheels. And hold the fiberglass pen on there, and you can actually see it cleaning up as it goes. It might be a little bit sticky because I haven't cleaned those yet. To make life even easier, I've actually got a little bit of copper clad with some bits of brass sticking out of it. Put the clips onto that and it just holds everything in place, and I can work one-handed. And there we go. Wheels now rotating, and gradually they will pick up the dirt that way. And basically, this is a nice, easy thing to do. First thing in the morning is just to sit there, polish up all the wheels using this. If everything's nice and shiny, should hopefully mean a nice day is running ahead. Now, you do need to bear in mind that some modern locomotives, the pickups are also on the pony wheels, so you'll have to move those by hand. But it's only a case of just spinning the wheel gradually and just giving it a little bit of a tickle that way. There is an alternative though. Gagemaster now produce this rather handy little brass brush arrangement that you sit onto the piece of track, and they do it in 00, and they also do an N-gauge version. Sit it on the track, put a bit of power through the track, and all being well, plonk your loco on there, and it'll sit there working away, cleaning its wheels. And this really should shift the real muck. So if you've got paint on the treads or anything like that because you've been weathering, this really will clean them up a treat. And that's great. A couple of minutes, nice shiny wheels. However, this is only half the equation. Clean wheels are nothing without clean track. So next we'll go and have a look at how we clean that up. Right, now having moved to the layout, we're going to need to clean the rails. The traditional way of cleaning rails is to take something like lighter fluid and a cotton bud and just give it a real rub on the top of the rail surface. It's smelly, but it really does work. And the best thing about lighter fluid is it evaporates so fast that you don't leave any scum on the rails, which you can do with some other liquid cleaners. However, for most of us, convenience means a track rubber. Quite simply, these are abrasive blocks that you rub on the track, and it polishes the top surface of the rail, but they're soft enough they don't actually damage the track. That's really important. Don't use something like emery cloth, because you can leave little scratches in the top of the rail surface and that will pick up dirt, something rotten. I've got two track rubbers here. This is a standard Pico track rubber available from any model shop, and this is a slightly bigger block available from the 00 Gauge Association, which does seem to last nicely. One of the problems with track rubbers is they can leave bits on your track. The Pico one is especially bad for this, so it's worth running over with a vacuum every so often, otherwise you get little sparkly bits in the ballast, which doesn't look realistic. However, if you've got a really large layout, any of those is probably going to seem like a lot of work. And a technique I picked up from Australian railway modelers a couple of years ago, where they tend to have very large layouts living in sheds, is not to clean the track at all. What they do is they take a graphite pencil like this. Pure graphite pencils like this can be bought from any art shop, and just rub it on the railhead for about 6 inches and then run trains over it. And the trains spread the graphite all over the rail and over the wheels, and it seems that that means they don't actually need to clean anything between operating sessions, which is fantastic obviously if your layout is 60 foot long and lives in a barn surrounded by snakes. The key thing is that the 12 volts or whatever the DCC voltage coming out the track, you must keep the wheel to track interface clean, and therefore that means a little bit of maintenance work. Do that and you'll find that for 5 minutes effort, the operating will be immensely more pleasurable.
In this shot, looking at the goods train approaching over the level crossing, it's quite a long shot, so we've actually set up the camera on the surface of the baseboard. It's got a little anti-slip mat underneath, and the camera battery actually propping up the lens. It's just giving the right height perspective that I actually wanted at that point. So it's looking down the length of the line. So once I've actually got the focusing set up on the camera at the nearest point, I've actually got some software on the SD card where I'm telling it to refocus every 30mm. Now we need that particularly at the front end because the depth of field is so limited there. We don't need it as much as we go into the distance, but close to, that we've got to take a sequence of shots. So once I've got the camera set up, then using the shutter release cable, I don't want to touch the camera again because that's going to lead to it all going astray. So then set it off. In this case, I'll probably run through about 25 to 30 shots, where I'll then take my pick afterwards and combine in Photoshop. So what we'll be doing in Photoshop is to actually combine a number of the frames together. And at the front end, we'll probably take sort of like one shot that's here, maybe here, all very close together, but as we move further away from the camera, can afford to have sort of obviously take a greater distance in between the separation of the shots through until the final shots in the distance, which may be about 50 centimetres apart in their focal point. It's a bit of a time-consuming process actually combining it in Photoshop, but it is the one main thing that makes a difference to say, when you look at a shot, yeah, I can see all of the detail in there, and it does look as though it's something like a prototype shot that we may have seen from 1911. Okay, I mean, a lot of people think that you need expensive and latest gear to undertake model railway photography, and you don't have to really. At the end of the day, I mean, this shot that we're doing here is a Canon compact camera, which actually picked up second hand with a warranty for about 120 quid. So it's certainly not prohibitive. One of the benefits of using smaller cameras like this is that you can get it into tighter positions like this so that we can get a different perspective on the model. One of the important things though is keeping the camera still, and hence obviously you'll see the tripod setup that we've got here, and once I've actually focused on the first point, when I set the camera running, the fact that we've got the camera stable on the tripod just means that the camera's not going to move anywhere, and that reduces the amount of blurring that you're going to get. So we started off our sequence of photos once again, and that was focused down at the closest wagons, and I'll let it run through the range. What a lot of model railway hobbyists, when they're taking photographs themselves, tend to do is just put the camera on automatic, plonk it down somewhere on the layout, and yeah, you'll get an interesting snap. But if you really want to get the most out of it, it's worth going back to the basics of photography and getting familiar with all of the manual modes within your camera. There may have been an instruction booklet that came with your camera. That'll show you how to use the manual features. What we want to do is use basically the smallest aperture or the highest f number that the camera will go down to. In this case, with this camera, it's only f8, but what that means is that we're getting the greatest depth of field for that one shot that we can do out of the camera. Now, everything else doesn't really matter. The shutter speed shouldn't matter because you should be on a tripod or actually on the baseboards. The ISO setting should be set to the lowest possible. For this camera, it's 80. Most cameras will go down to about 100. If you have that at too high a number, that's where all your graininess actually comes from in the photos. So keep it down at the lowest ISO number that you can do, and that's where you'll pull out more detail in your photographs. So, highest f number, shutter speed doesn't matter, lowest ISO number that you can do. Now here we're actually working with ambient light, which is fluorescent light in the club rooms here, and that gives quite a nice neutral, easy to deal with tone. When you're at home, you might have a different form of lighting from this, so you need to look at the white balance settings on your camera. Most cameras these days are pretty good with their auto white balance as to what they'll actually do for you, but it may also be worth familiarising yourself with the controls of how to manually set the white balance. And to do that, you need a piece of white or grey card, and you can take a photograph of that, which will then sort of like change the settings on your camera to work with the lights that you've actually got around your own layout. The other thing as well, that it's nice to deal with quite diffuse light. Only deal with sort of harsher light if you're after something a little bit more creative and once you've got a little bit more experienced with it. Okay, so I've set off another series of photos. We'll talk you through the whole process of stacking the Photoshop inside of it and tidying up the background if you really want to get stuck into model railway photography.